welcome to the AkiListen podcast. My name is Sid Powar, and I'm the Supply Chain Center of Excellence Director here at Akili, as well as your host today. For this episode, we proudly present the next discussion of our AkiListen series, the evolution of Achilles culture. Joining me on this discussion are my fellow Akilians, Alan, Julie, and Ben, here to share what Akili is, or what culture is at Akili and what they see for the company in the future. So let's jump right into it. Start with the introductions. Alan, let's go with you first. If you can give our audience, a little bit of your background, who you are, how long you've been with Akili, and where you're located.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. Yeah, so I've had a pretty long, disconnected journey with Akili. I actually started working for Akili in 1993, and I was with the company through 2001. And then the fall of 2001, I left, went to work for another company here in Dallas. And in 2007, about almost exactly 6 years later, I rejoined Akili and have been back since then. So I've been back now for actually this week, 14 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I can't do that math. How many years is that in total? Around 20 years. I got 20 years or so tenure with Akili. So I'm currently the COO, which really means I lead the consulting team here at Akili and all of our client-facing activity that we do here in the company. And I am in Dallas.
Great. Thanks, Alan. And Julie, if you don't mind giving us your background.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Julie Zemer, and I have been with Akili, a total of 12 years. I started out back in 98, I think, and worked initially for about 3 years, left and did a lot of industry stuff in between, and then came back to Akili. I think that was in 2012. So been back 9.5 years now. So I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and I am a senior consultant focusing on building and plan models, which is my thing. So.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And then over to you, Ben.
Sure. So my name's Ben Goodson. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I've been with Akili for, I believe I'm in my 6th year at Akili. Came in as a consultant, and now I'm currently a solution leader, a solution architect within the delivery practice. So I don't have a multi-term experience like my other compadres on the call here, but that's my story.
Great. Yeah, and just from my side, I am based in Denver, Colorado as well. So today on this panel, we have 3 people from Colorado, clearly outweighing Alan.
Go Cowboys.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So up front, I think everybody's really interested in listening to you, Alan, to find out, really about how the foundation of Achilles culture started. And if you can speak to a little bit of that background, give us kind of, a little bit of a recap of, where it all started.
Yeah. So, there were actually 2 gentlemen that started Akili, a guy named Andrew Thorby and another guy named Sheik Shah. Sheik is actually still the principal owner of Akili and currently our CEO. Andrew was actually involved in the company until around 2005 or so. And he just got focused on some other things, and he went off in another direction. But the 2 of them, I think, I over the years I've looked back, I think they really from day one, they did a couple of things. One, they kind of treated the company, it was literally 2 guys, trying to get it going. They really did things to build a vision of being a much bigger company, from day one. And so I think that they started the company with the idea of creating a place that could be an alternative to some of the larger system integrators that exist at that time, but also to be a place that they would want to work for, if they could go somewhere to work, is really kind of their mindset as they did that. And so I think that, both of them had a really diverse backgrounds. And I think, Sheik, as an example, he worked for EDS for, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. And, you can imagine being in such a large environment, such a structured environment, the kind of way that they worked. That wasn't what he wanted, at the end of the day.
Right.
And so I think they really just looked at that and said, what can we do here to create an environment that we serve our customer, and we're almost exclusively focused on how do we serve the interests of our clients, and how do we create an environment here that people just want to be here, they want to practice their craft in this environment, and so it wasn't something that after it kind of got going and we got the 10, 15 employees, then it was like, all right, so how do we make this a great place to work? It was that was one of the fundamental tenets of starting the company, really, at the end of the day. So they one of the things they did really early on was create the core values, that if you go to our website today, you're going to see them. They're pretty prominent and they're really unchanged. And that was in 1992. So those were truly something that I will also say, looking back on it, having been there, I joined in 93, not too long after they started the company. I knew them both from, they were actually working on a consulting engagement that I was on with them when they met and started talking about forming the company. And they were, extremely focused on those core values and making that a part of how we thought every day. I mean, it was very common in the early days for me to go to Andrew and say, hey, I've got this issue I'm working on with a client and maybe with one of our consultants. And he would say, build the core values. Let's literally pull them up, kind of go through them. Something's going to come to you and say that's really kind of what's going on here, right? We're not focused on our fiduciary responsibility to the client or on accountability or whatever, right? But it instilled that, I think, in the entire team, One of the other things that happened early on, again, as you kind of look back on it, that I think really helped contribute to the way the culture really became part of how we work was really the first 25, 30 people that came to work for Akili were all friends of ours or people that we had worked with, in other companies. So it was just a lot of hires of people that we already knew that we knew we wanted to work with, right? And so there was a very quick kind of gelling of people from day one as we started growing and bringing people into the company. And so I think all that, really started it. It really helped create the foundation of, what existed through the 90s and what exists now.
Right. I think you touched upon something that is a bit related. You talked about hiring, initially people that you knew and enjoyed working with. How has that kind of, over the years, your hiring practices, I'm sure, is trying to find that culture fit with a person that can gel better with the team, can work really well with the team. Speak to me and the audience about kind of how has that evolved, or what really do you look for in that person apart from all the technical skills that they need to have?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big part of what we look for when we're hiring someone. So to this day, I'll get interview notes from someone who's interviewed us, a candidate. And I don't even ask this anymore, but I think people just know. I'll get a lot of notes about their experience and their capability and whether they think they really got Anaplan knowledge or whatever it is we're looking for. But they'll almost always end it with, I believe they're a good cultural fit here. And we have absolutely had people that we believed had the capability to do this job, but would not hire them if we didn't believe they would fit into what we are. Right. And I think that, that's really hard to quantify. What is that? So it's definitely a bit of a gut feel. Right. What I look for when I'm talking to candidates is, I kind of fundamentally believe at the end of the day, if I had to try to encapsulate what is it really for us that we are, I think we have a group of people that are highly talented, very smart, but they're very focused on delivering value and solutions for our customers. I mean, that's just really it at the end of the day. But they enjoy doing that with the people that they work with and having a good time while they're doing it. And I think most of the time, I think we can say we do both of those things. I think we deliver very high value. And I think most of the time our teams will look back and say, that was a great rewarding experience working with you. Not 100% on that, but I think generally, if we aren't, we look at it and figure out why not and how are we going to fix that. And we're always looking to improve, which is a core value, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
So delivering value for the customers at the same time having fun working together.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make it that simple, but I do think that's a big part of it. I mean, I really think that's a lot of what it comes down to is we're here to serve our customers and try to make their world better, how they work better.
Yep.
And we're going to have a good time while we're doing it because you can spend a lot of time with these people, right?
Yep.
You're not really going to do it well long term if you don't enjoy the process and the people you're working with on that journey at the end of the day. It's my belief.
True. Okay, so I'm gonna ask fairly newer, folks on the team, Julie and Ben, to chime in on the next part, which is really how has the culture evolved over the years. Julie, if you can go first. You've heard what Alan has shared. You've kind of experienced it over your time here at Akili. Share with us kind of what are your thoughts about the evolution of the culture.
Sure. Well, first of all, the whole senior team has gotten a lot older, so that's myself included in that. So, yeah, so that's a piece of it. But we've got a bunch of younger people that are taking the place of what we were way back when. And I would say that. So obviously the individuals have changed, but the type of people have not. And also, obviously, more recently, the remote culture. I have been working this whole last 9 years from Boulder and not being in Dallas, and that has increased a lot in the past few years. I don't know how many of our people are actually remote, but a lot of them, and especially with COVID. So that's been probably the biggest change. But outside of that, I feel like the general culture really hasn't changed because we do hire the right type of people, as Alan explained. So that would be my main answer to that.
And then what about the consistent aspect of it? I mean, you talked a little bit about maybe the remote aspect, has evolved, but then what are the aspects that are consistent? Obviously, the values, right? I think Alan talked about those being very consistent, and in fact, we've grown more, stronger in terms of our belief in those values. So, what are other consistent pieces on those?
So I think, I always come back to the people. And for me, a lot of what Alan said is I echo, but it's people that are really smart, that take a lot of pride in what they do. And there's always, I feel like, an overarching sense of humor that's not talked enough about, but I think that is key. I mean, the jokes, the pranks, the silly stuff that you laugh about for years, that it seems like we have so many people. One of the best examples of that, I think, is on this call. Ben Goodson's about one of the funniest people I've ever met. But if there's a lightheartedness that goes along with the really hard work and pride. And of course the values are there. I always, I don't think there's one person at Akili that I would not want to work on a team with. And that's what it always boils down to for me when I'm interviewing people. It's, do I want this person on my team? And so all of those things have remained consistent in my mind since my original hiring. So, and I came from Big Six to Akili. So that was a big change. Another thing I would throw in there on that note is this is an organization of very few rules, and that a lot of people can't operate in that, but that's what makes us, in a lot of ways, so special in my mind and so great to work for.
Great. Well, thanks, Julie. I'll move over to Ben. Ben, same question to you. What, in your opinion, has stayed consistent, and what has changed over the 6 years or so that you've been part of the organization?
Sure. I would say just sort of taking a step back of when I joined Akili, I was in Denver, and I was sort of at the point where I was like, if I need to move to Dallas, I would. But, right off the bat, they're like, no, like, we see no need for you to move down here. Like, stay where you're in Denver. And I was like, all right, that's interesting. Like, I've only met a handful of these people, but they're like, okay, you're going to do your thing there, and you'll travel to meet up with people or whatever. We'll bring you down to Dallas. And I was like, all right, and so there was like an unspoken like freedom of Julie, what she was talking about right there at the end of, we hired you, like you said, you're going to do this work. You're going to do it. You can do it from Denver, And so in speaking to like the smart people and hiring quality talent, like it took a little longer for me to get to know that in depth from being remote, but you sort of within Akili, there's this fostered environment of, your work's going to open some doors, and if you can prove your worth to people, then, that bond only grows, and as you get put on more projects and as you just have more experience with different situations, you sort of morph into a source that people might rely upon, or who to go talk to because they've been in a situation, And so with all of those sort of, trials and tribulations of what a project and working with people and understanding people's nuances and clients' nuances and going through some clunker of a project, you really learn how people are. And so people come and go, everyone's got to do what's right for them. And Akili is very accepting of that. But I would say that the consistency of people over the time that I've been at Akili has been a large part of what keeps you at Akili, like knowing that you can go and listen to somebody BS about whatever their problem is and look to somebody across the room, whether it's on Zoom or in person, more recently on Teams, I guess, but look at them and just be like, they don't get it, but that you both are in the same boat. So we're going to sit there and listen to this person talk, and at the end of the day, we'll still we know what we need to provide for them. Everybody's got a soapbox and some people like to just preach on it, so I would say that people for me has been consistent, and, I would say it's the, sort of the integrity and the accountability, There's definitely, if you're tasked to work for 40 hours a week, you need to get those 40 hours done, and coming from a corporate setting into that for Akili was definitely a transition for me. It's like, okay, I need to be on at 8:00 every morning. And then you go, do I, but then it's like, oh, that is due this week. And so I'm going to put in the time to get that done, whatever that happens to be. And if that means waking up at 6 and working to 10, great. Hopefully it's not that over the long haul, but there's a push inevitably. So you do that. And so for me, it was more of a personal understanding of like, I guess me maturing just sort of instantly of being incorporated with Akili, of just being like, okay, and if you don't get your stuff done, then you face, the problem, and hopefully that's not in front of a client. Hopefully it's not super brash, but just know that that's coming, and so that's sort of the check that, you sort of have to grow with, but I would say that consistency has been there. And I would say it's not for everybody. There's a lot of people that like to be told this is how you're going to do it. Go do it, come back, and we'll give you your next task. And there's definitely a put yourself out there sort of mentality with an Akili, like that you can offer up advice, that you're willing to help, that you're, that you are part of this team. even if you aren't part of the team, like someone can
Yeah.
message you randomly and just be like, yo, need some help on this. And you're like, man, I haven't looked at that in months, but I'm going to be happy to take the time to help you out, And so
Right.
there's definitely a cohesive team mentality that's been consistent the whole time.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very true.
So,
Alan, did you have? Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to follow up on a couple of
Yeah.
things through both of those conversations. One would be, you asked me kind of how this started, and I talked about Sheik and Andrew. I will say though that, and I hope and I believe that Julie and Ben would both echo this for sure. But Sheik and Andrew started it for sure, and really institutionalized that. But the employees really took ownership of the culture over time,
Right.
and to the point where I give you an example of something that this has always stood out to me. But and this was probably late 90s, 97 timeframe maybe. We had hired a gentleman who was super smart. Probably, maybe, no offense to anybody on the call, but maybe the smartest person we ever hired that worked at Akili. But and so he came in and he had some really big success early on in some work that we were doing. But over time, we started hearing a lot of chatter from employees who were working with him. And to Ben's point, he was a micromanager. He was just every day, what are you doing? He would look at all your work and tell you everything you did wrong, whether it was really wrong, he just didn't like it. And really, quite honestly, the organization kind of spit him out, and it's not the only time that's really happened. And quite honestly, I've actually talked to people before who were struggling with some stuff, and I was just really frank and said, look, here's what's happening to you. You're not engaging with your team members in a collaborative, cooperative way. You're trying to be the hero, and they're not going to tolerate it, and I'm not going to make them. At the end of the day, you can figure out how to be a team player, or you can leave or get fired. One or the other is going to happen. And so I actually actively, I wouldn't say I actively talk to people about it, but if someone comes to me with issues like that, my first reaction is, I don't want to get engaged. I want you guys to figure out if you can work it out. If you can't, I'll deal with that. But I want you to figure it out. And I think that, I think that serves the organization very well. This is not a top-down thing by any stretch, in my opinion. Hopefully Ben and Julie both echo that. The other thing I would say, the integrity deal came up, and I could go on this one for a while. I think the integrity deal is a big deal. I mean, that's certainly an individual thing, and just the integrity that we expect in our interactions with each other. And I think most people would say they absolutely know that that's there. But the company as a whole has had a pretty high level of integrity from day one. We've done some things in relation to clients and things that might have happened where we didn't show up with our best performance, but we dealt with it, and I think we dealt with it in a very appropriate way. And I'll just kind of make two comments on this just really quickly. One, I left Akili in 2001. I was the CIO at a company for about 6 years, and we got a new CEO, and just kind of realized after a little while it was time for me to leave. It wasn't the environment that I wanted to be in anymore. And quite honestly, I was kind of burnt out on consulting in 2001 when I left, and it was a hard time, and I had no intention of going back into consulting. But I got to talking to Sheik about what was going on, and I was kind of intrigued by where the focus of the company was at that point. And I had some long conversations with him about coming back, and certainly with myself. And I remember getting to a point one day where it's like the only thing holding me up really is I don't know if I want to go back to consulting. But I knew if I did, the only company that I felt like I could go back and I could be in a consulting role and work with a high level of integrity was at Akili. So it kind of came down to, okay, I could do it at Akili. I would absolutely not do that same job in that role anywhere else,
Right.
And I certainly believe since I've come back, I've absolutely been able to operate with that integrity. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to either Sheik and Andrew through the 90s or Sheik now and said, here's what's happening on this engagement, and here's what I think we need to do to make this right for the customer. And I've never had pushback on anything like that.
Yeah, I think, you brought up some really interesting, aspect of working for larger companies as well as working for Akili, where I've noticed that people are willing to have, be vulnerable and be willing to have those difficult conversations, up front rather than trying to,
Bury it.
hide it under a car. Yeah, bury it. And
Yeah.
so having those difficult conversations, whether it's with a customer, whether it's, with the employees, I think it just builds that much more trust, in my opinion. And I've seen that in my short time here, is that we're willing to do that, and we've I think had more occasions of having those difficult conversations than I've seen working for Fortune 100 companies. So
Right.
definitely see that and echo that comment of yours.
Right.
And I don't know if Ben and Julie have any comments, but Alan, go ahead.
Well, I'll make one other comment on this. There's a whole several stories behind this, but we did work for a CFO back in the late 90s. Several different projects for this company. I had a really long-term relationship with them. And then when we got into the planning space where we are now, in the 2008, 2009 timeframe, we actually started doing some work for him again. And so it kind of came back around. So we actually did 2 different companies and 2 different projects with him. And one time, I actually asked him to be a reference for us with another customer. And so I don't normally sit on all these calls, but I did on this particular deal, just given how we were talking about it. And so this prospect had a couple of questions he asked the CFO, and the CFO just answered them really quickly and said, yeah, this absolutely will work. It's technology works. Akili can get it done for you. And so the prospect didn't have very many questions. And after about 10, 15 minutes, he's like, okay, I'm good. Thank you for your time. And he said, well, I have a question. The other CFO that we'd worked with for a long time said, I have a question for you. He said, have you picked the services provider yet? And he said, well, we're not there. And he said, well, when you do, you need to pick Akili. They don't need to go to anybody else. And he said, well, why? And he said, they're the only consulting firm I've ever worked with that I truly believe had my interest in mind as much as their own, which I thought was just a great story for a long-term relationship and work we did with this person and how they felt about us.
Yeah, those are the best. The customer endorsements and the employee endorsements are always the best, and they reinforce, what it's all about, the culture and our values. And we have a lot more that we're going to cover in our part 2. So definitely want to keep our audience engaged on that. Shifting gears a little bit to kind of our first segment, where we talked a little bit about what it means to each one of us, culture at Akili. Also, Julie, Ben, myself, we work remotely, and I know that we're not in the office 24/7 or at least 5 days a week. And with COVID last year, I think that also changed the dynamics a bit. But I want to ask Julie, you potentially first, about how does that affect, you being remote, and you've been remote for a long time. You touched a little bit on it, but what does it mean to be a remote employee and being able to affect the culture at Akili?
I think I've always had the ability to build relationships on the teams that I work with without being in person. Now, having said that, I've often worked on projects where I don't have other Akili members on it. So some of it boils back to I worked with these people a long time ago, and we were all still, I just really like the people. The other piece of it is when I do go to Dallas, and I try to make a point of that at least 2 times a year, hopefully more. I'd really try to engage with the people when I'm there, whether that's just hanging out at our wine and whiskey Wednesdays or going to lunch or, just chit-chatting. And occasionally I also make a point of just calling people randomly that I don't work with all the time to just, see how they're doing, what's going on. I've just never found the distance to be an issue for me personally. I think it does impact others, but it's not an issue for me. I've always built relationships long distance. So
no, that's key, building relationships and being able to call anybody up and connect. regularly. So that's a great point. Ben, how about you? Any other advice that you have for remote employees, and how do you kind of think of yourself as, being able to be part of the Akili culture, but then also being able to affect?
I think that for me, the remote aspect was a little bit of a hurdle at first, coming from a corporate setting, being able to do a drive-by somebody, go ask a question. It was before like any of the Zooms or any chat had really been sort of exposed. That was still sort of there, and so moving to remote, it took a little while for me, and I just really had to dedicate a space that I could call, my office, if you will. I don't have an issue talking with anybody, but I also want to be able to have that, and being able to, not just be cracking open a laptop on the kitchen table and then shut it at the end of the day and then reopen it. Like, that just wasn't for me. Some people can do that, and that's great, but I needed the ability to carve out my own space. And so once I was able to do that, being remote was great. I have no issues with being remote. I think that with COVID, being remote is way more of a commonality now, both for internal, employees, but then also with clients, And I think that that's going to be the next evolution of what we want to do, is how do we create that culture? Because so much of it is built off this team bond. When you're dealing with somebody that's a coworker, for weeks at a time, where you guys are doing something together, you learn something about somebody. You learn a tick, you learn who their favorite sports team is, what their dog is, what their kids do, what they're into. And so that sort of bond is really what you fall back on, because at the end of the day, we're doing a job and we're all trying to get through the day, unscathed, and so working through that with people, and learning who people are, that's the part that's enjoyable, and being able to have that, here's a 90s term for you, a Rolodex of people that you can just sort of call on within Akili is what's a security thing, that that you're not necessarily batting alone, even if you are on a project by yourself, there's still someone that you can reach out to, and raising a flag earlier is way better than late, and so
absolutely.
There's definitely learning curve on all of that, and being able to put yourself out there, being able to say, I need help on something. That's a big ask of some people, and other people take to it more naturally. And so getting that comfortability, I know that takes time. But I think that once you sort of experience, then you sort of buy into it a little bit more, and so I would say that, it's by no means a perfect scenario, no matter what, but that being remote, I think that over the last year or so, we've sort of proven that being remote is okay, and that we can still deliver good work. It might not be exactly the same as it was before, but there's still people doing the job behind the scenes, and you're still delivering a quality project.
Right. Great.
And I would just add that I've never reached out for, and I do have no problem reaching out for help, but not once have I ever been let down. I mean, people have no problem jumping in and giving you as much time as you need to understand it or to figure something out. So that's part of the culture.
True. Great. And I think we have a lot more to cover in our second series, or second part of this culture series. We're going to cover more on our culture club and our clean talk initiatives that Alan will share more about those initiatives as well. So what I'd like to do is I really want to thank all of you for joining me on this culture chat today. Enjoyed learning about the history of Akili, how culture started and what made our culture what it is today. Alan, some of the personal stories Alan shared today really I think brings home the point of where we are in terms of our culture and how this organization has, evolved over time. So big thanks to our listeners as well for joining us on this inside look at our Akili culture. And for more information on our culture and career inquiries, visit our website at Akili.com or contact our recruiter, Lindsay Goodyear. Stay tuned for more episodes. With that, I thank you for your time today and have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks.
See ya.